I'm here with Adam Schefter. Everyone recognizes him, NFL guru.
Maybe
inside.
not everyone.
But Adam and I go way back. Once upon a time, a long time ago, Adam was an intern at the Chicago Tribune, and now look at, this is what happens to interns at the Chicago Tribune. If only I had been an intern at the Chicago Tribune.
I would come into the Chicago Tribune, and I would be in awe of sitting there. Some people like to go to baseball games and look at their favorite players. I would go to the Chicago Tribune and look at my favorite sports writers, and you were one having broken that Penn State story.
Right.
With Penn State going to the Big Ten, which was a big story. That was the biggest story.
That was the biggest story I did, yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for being with us. So want to get a little bit into what your job is and your mandate from me. So what is your mandate from ESPN? Break?
Well, I'll say this. My mandate from ESPN is nothing, really. They've never told me anything. In fact, I will tie in my mandate with a story here, which is true, and that is everybody who comes to work here goes through orientation. And when I was hired back in August of 2009, they set up orientation for me the second day that I was going to be here. The first day, as I was driving up here, was when Brett Favre decided to take off from Mississippi to fly to Minnesota. So I had to get here extra quick because we were just launching the 9 a.m. Sports Center for the first time. And so the second day, they said, we'll get you orientation the second day. They scheduled me in, and I go down to orientation about 8:45, and as I'm about to go into the room, Plexico Burress gets sentenced to 18 months in prison, and they rush me to the Sports Center. Long story short, it is now 7 full years later, and I still have not had orientation, so nobody has told me what my mandate is. I'm just trying to make it and figure out exactly what I'm supposed to be doing every day.
Your goal is to break as many stories, to report as comprehensively on the NFL as possible, and that means also breaking stories. And obviously a big part of that is breaking stories.
My goal is to babysit the NFL, to make sure that everybody's staying in line, to report on anybody who's not, to report on anybody who's getting hired or fired, traded, cut, coming or going. Anything that's interesting, relevant, germane to the most popular sport in our country falls within my jurisdiction. Nobody's told me that we expect you to get this or that, but I just operate as if that is my job and I must pursue all those things.
Mm-hmm. And I've been with you, I don't know if you're still, but you have two, not one, but two, you carry 2 cell phones with you.
Yeah, still do, right here. Here's one in my lap right now, and the other's in my pocket. Now, there are 2 different providers, because sometimes you're in bad cell zones. They are different in the sense that you could sometimes post on Twitter or you post on Facebook, or you could talk to somebody as you type. And there's a lot of uses for 2 phones. People don't even realize how many there are.
But so you're in a typical day, especially, as camps are starting, I'm talking tonight now, the training camps are starting, but obviously, trade deadlines are just in general. I mean, what percentage of that day are you on the phone, and how many people do you think you're talking to a day?
Well, I think in this day and age, we've become such a texting society that I try to make a conscientious effort, and it's one of the things that I want to do even more of being on the phone. Like yesterday, I was just in my own mind reviewing it. So I spoke yesterday to 3 GMs and 2 coaches during the course of the day, various other people. I texted with a bunch of others. Now, it's not every day that you're speaking with 5 power brokers, so to speak. Maybe some days it's 1, maybe some days it's none, maybe some days it's 3, maybe some days it's 6. It just depends on the news. Mm-hmm. You're consistently texting, and I think that you're operating as if you're going into a day. For instance, on July 15th of this year, it's the franchise deadline day. You know that any NFL player who has the franchise tag could sign a new deal. I don't like those days as much because everybody knows what's coming or what could come, and you've got every single football reporter out there hunting the same information. I like the days where you're sitting somewhere and all of a sudden something happens that you weren't expecting. And to me, that is...
You got an example? Is there something that stands out for you?
There are certain stories that I've put tons of time into and don't materialize for whatever reason. There are other stories that you don't put any effort into and all of a sudden just pop. Like, I'll give you an example. There was a time, it was December 23rd, 2014. It was a Monday. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We had just finished taping Insiders. We were going into NFL Live. And we were in the old studio. my cell phone rang and I pick it up and they say, hey, don't ask any questions, just telling you the information. Tony Romo is out for the year. He's not playing Sunday. Now, the Dallas Cowboys that week,
Right.
entering Week 17, were playing the Philadelphia Eagles for the division championship, the NFC East title, a shot for the playoffs, a home playoff game. There was a lot on the line. And somebody called, I said, whoa, hold on, what? He's out for the year. He's got a back injury. He needs surgery. Now, again, you have to know who you're talking to. I knew this particular person and had known this person for a little bit of time. I knew his connection with the team, and I said to myself, we're good. I don't need to double check that. So I send him the story. I yell, hey, Mort, because Mort was in the next room. I think we got something interesting here. Tony Romo is out for the year, needs back surgery. What? So he starts getting on the phones to make calls, see what he could find out. I send it in. And what made the story even more compelling was that I follow the story. They have me on NFL Live. They break in like it's some presidential news, and
Right.
we do a whole hour on Tony
Right.
Romo, and then tease the fact that Jason Garrett is going to be stepping to the podium in Valley Ranch to talk about the Cowboys, and he comes to the podium and they say, what about Tony Romo? And he says, well, we'll see whether he can play on Sunday. And so, one of my bosses called me, you sure about that? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. You want to call back your guy and make sure that we got this right? Yeah, no, I'm telling you, we got this right. And the week went on, and there are all sorts of other reporters even here filing reports, Tony Romo's still hoping to play or whatever it was. And I'll never forget that Friday, as I was driving, all of a sudden my phone started vibrating like crazy. And the Cowboys announced that Tony Romo had undergone back surgery and was out for the year. So there we go.
There you go. So okay, take us to, I'm not going to ask you who called you, but how does that call, I would imagine, was the byproduct of a very long relationship that you had with that person, and that the foundation for your reporting is relationships, getting to know people,
Like
and
anything in
getting
any business, right?
Well, you do it better than most. Talk about the idea of relationships and why it's so important to what you do.
First of all, the one thing I'm very proud of is that you mentioned interning at the Chicago Tribune. That was in 1989. And I began covering the NFL in 1990. So I've done this now for 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
You'd like to think over 26 years that you develop some people that you do have relationships with.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that I've always tried to pride myself on is treating people fair and right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I've ever misled anybody ever. I don't feel like I've ever compromised anybody ever. I don't feel as if I've been a taker. I've been fortunate enough and kind enough to where people have thought of me in situations like that. But I really believe that I give back as much, if not more, than I receive. And you probably wonder, like when you're on the phone with a coach, you can't call a coach, I don't think, and just say, what's going on? Mm-hmm. Tell me about this. What's that? You have to have something that's relevant or interesting for them. And that is hard. Mm-hmm. That's work. That's the work. And so I always try to have something for everybody. And you have people that call you, hey, can you find out this? What's the deal with that? Can you help me on that? And a lot of it sometimes is driven with trades, personnel moves, money, new contracts. So I think like in life, like in any line of work, you can't be a taker, you have to be a giver. And I'd like to think that, like I said, I've given as mm-hmm. much, if not more, than I've taken.
One thing you didn't have 26 years ago, as we talk today, is social media.
Yeah.
Do you even know how many Twitter followers you have?
No.
500 million?
I don't know.
No, it's probably over 4 or 5 million. We'll check, but how has that changed your job and what you do?
Well, the followers, I honestly don't pay much attention to
Right.
at all. I did when I first got on Twitter, like, wow, I've got 800 followers. Wow, I'm up over 1,000. Like, at that point, it's a novelty. Wow, this is kind of cool. And honestly, it really doesn't mean very much, and it doesn't take long for that excitement to wear off. I think it's just changed the nature of our profession. It makes news instantaneous. How many times, if you think back on your newspaper career, did you get a call at 4 o'clock on something and you're working on it and you could have tweaked it and you got to develop that story, and sometimes it changes. Guy's going to get traded. Oh, he's not getting traded. Now he wants to stay. Now he's getting a contract extension or whatever it may be. And it literally will change over the course of an afternoon. And yet in the social media world, you're required to report instantaneously information as it happens. So how do you develop things as they're developing themselves while you're posting? It's just very difficult to do that. And so there's that pressure to be accurate, to be right. There's the pressure to be first. There's all these stories too. They're constantly changing. That's the part that, I don't know, to use the Tony Romo example, at that point he was having back surgery. He was going to be out. Now maybe on Wednesday he would have gone to the doctor and another examination would have revealed that, you know, it's not as bad and I'm going to try to play through this. It didn't happen that way, but what if it did? So then people would have excoriated you on social media, which is the way the world works.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, this idea though that the deadline is 3 seconds ago. Deadline is, there's no such thing as deadlines at midnight or whatever. It is, you know, this constant, and the competition is intense. I don't think that there's, what's that like for you? I'm sure it's a good thing and it's got positives and negatives.
Well, I was just talking with somebody, and we've done this as the NFL people are coming back to work, and we're doing this interview in July of 2016, if I'm allowed to date it.
Right.
You know, people say, how was your summer, what'd you do? And this job, the thing about it is, it never leaves you. You're never off, ever. Because on July 2nd, somebody's going to call you to just ask you a question. I had one guy this summer that was calling me, hey, do you know what Bill Belichick was making this? You know, do you know what he makes? That is like a state secret. Now, I never was able to figure out exactly what he, but you know, you can figure out rough parameters. But this guy must have called me 6 times on this one piece of information. You know, I'm like, man, it's July 1st. You know, we're on the July 4th. What's the deal? And that's what I'm talking about. It never stops. It never stops. And, you know, I love it. It's funny, you know, they'll put you down on the schedule. Oh, you're not down on the schedule. Oh, you're off. There are no days off, ever.
Do you ever take a vacation or do you ever?
Well, my wife doesn't like to fly.
Right.
We got 2 kids. We got 4 dogs. She doesn't like to leave them. I would honestly love to take a vacation because I think it's important to regenerate, refresh yourself. We don't take vacations. And people say, oh, Adam Schefter, never vacation. But it's not that.
Right.
I would love to. I really would love to, but I don't, and I haven't.
But do you take days off? I mean, do you ever have a day when you don't pick up the phone and?
Never. That never happened. And not only that, but a lot of times, like anybody else, you just wake up in the middle of the night. Like I'm thinking, okay, I got to check on this, or I got to write this down, or think of that. And so, I think anybody who's invested in their job in any line of work, not just this one, it just never leaves you. It's always there, and that's fine. I love what I do, so I'm good with that. Like I wake up, I was off this week on Monday or Tuesday, technically, and. You know, all we did was try to report on stories and file stories and do sports center hits and radio. Like that was my off day.
Do you still though? When I was watching last night, and they had the ticker at the bottom of the screen, and you must have had a couple, 2 or 3. I can't remember how many, but at least, I saw your name a few times. Adam Schefter reports. I mean, does that still give you a thrill to kind of see that your name's on a story after all these years?
Well, I'll say this. Back when we wrote for the newspaper, you'll understand this. You would pick up the newspaper, and I thought it was always kind of cool, especially when you first get started. You see your name in print, right? That was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. And then when you break a story, remember that was, a news. You had a story to yourself.
Oh yeah.
At 6 a.m, and you knew it was going to be a whole nother day before the news. Your competitor can catch up because they weren't printing another newspaper until the next day. I mean, that was awesome. But
it's a huge difference in today's world, and so.
but now the scoops last about 30 seconds, but it's still yours, though.
If you're first, yeah.
Yeah.
If you're first, yeah. I don't stare at the TV and, oh, there's my name. Although it's funny, one of my bosses called me the other day, just last week. He's like, oh, my son just saw your name on the ticker. And he's like, I know him. And you got a kick out of him. Well, yeah, you tell him that the reason that's there because you're working me so hard. You know? But I get a charge out of being involved in stories, especially big stories. There's nothing like a big story. The name, the credit, all that stuff, that's completely secondary. It's not why you do it.
Yeah.
But it was more fun to see your name in the newspaper, but it's not completely insignificant or unnoticed if you happen to see your name scrolling across the bottom line.
Sure.
Just because it just justifies the job that you have done on that particular story.
As we sign off here, we got to, this group will include
I don't
journalism
feel like I
students.
gave them enough instruction. Right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. What kind of, what's your 2-minute piece of advice that you can give to future sports journalists out there?
Well, the one thing I would preach is work to be fair, to be honorable, to treat people right, to keep your word, don't go back on that, to give more than you get, to know that you can do anything you want. Like, I never would have thought that I ever could work as a sports writer at the Chicago Tribune, no less cover the Denver Broncos or write books or then work and transition to television and work in TV and cover the NFL. So there are all sorts of things that you can do. If someone wants to be president of the United States, go be the president of the United States. You can do that too. Like, the world is out there, go do it. It's such a changing medium that I don't even know what to tell people about how they should prepare for it. But I will say this also, and this would be my lasting piece of advice. When I was at the Chicago Tribune and hungry beyond words to break into that profession and would have given anything to have done that, and I sought advice from countless people in the business, the one thing that always came back to me was read, write. And they said read 30 minutes every day. And when I was younger, now I'm older, I have kids, the pressures of the social media, I don't read as much as I'd like to. But when I was 21, 22, 23, I made sure I read minimum 30 minutes every day. Sometimes I spend all day reading. And I keep a journal still to this day and have since 1990. I have every day of my life documented. So I try to write, I try to read, and that's the one thing, whether you want to be a anchor or a reporter or in newspapers or on TV or a blogger, you have to know how to write, you have to know how to articulate your thoughts. So to me, it's critical to exercise your mind by reading and writing.
Thank you, Adam. Great
Thank
stuff.
you, Ed. I appreciate it. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.